Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Dr. Guillermo Pulido and the entire team at UNAM Chicago, I would like to give everyone a warm welcome. As an active participant in the city of Chicago's academic and cultural life, UNAM Chicago seeks to stimulate public awareness of art to enrich our society. We consider imperative to foster an appreciation of the arts while maintaining the integrity and excellence of our educational programs. Part of our mission is to establish an environment for learning and to inspire through our exhibits the relationship between art, artists, ideas, and cultures, while providing the audience with new and intellectually challenging experiences. After brief remarks from our director, Guillermo Pulido, we will present a brief video of muralism. And now, I would like to ask our director, Guillermo Pulido, to come to the podium for opening remarks.
Muchas gracias, Alberto. Muy buenas tardes, tengan todas y todos, sean bienvenidos a esta escuela de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México en Chicago. Dear friends and colleagues, Ambassador, Latin American diplomats, good afternoon and welcome to the National Autonomous University of Mexico branch in Chicago. As part of the work carried out by our university, we are honored to share with you the exhibition Muralism Mexico Reinterpreted. This effort was undertaken more than a year ago by our institution through the Institute of Aesthetic Research and the Gaceta UNAM. It marks the anniversary of an ambitious project which has as its main goal to showcase some of the murals that are part of our heritage and to promote a collective reflection process on the origin and context of their creation. It is in fact a year of celebrations in which a series of publications and multimedia materials had been published. Conferences had been held on all UNAM campi, as we are doing today here in Chicago, where we will be listening Sandra Cetina, a specialist from UNAM, who will be speaking about the key moments in the Mexican muralism. Muchas gracias, Sandra, por estar aquí con nosotros. For several months, UNAM Chicago has been working with the Manuel Toussaint archives of the Institute of Aesthetic Research on the curatorship of this exhibition that brings together a brief but meaningful selection of the 150 photos of murals that UNAM has under its custody. Our heartfelt thanks to Professor Cecilia Gutierrez Arriola and Ricardo Alvarado for all the support and the curatorship of this marvelous exhibition. We would also like to acknowledge the director of the Institute, Professor Angélica Velázquez Guadarrama, and UNAM's press secretary, Néstor Martínez Cristo, who is here with us today. Muchas gracias, Néstor, por acompañarnos. For undertaking this work of research and dissemination of one of the most transcendental cultural legacies in modern Mexico. The exhibition consists of 12 photographs of some of the most important murals safeguarded by the Institute, which shows, as a title of the exhibit stands, a reinterpreted Mexico. Diego Rivera, Dr. Adl, José Clemente Orozco, David Alfaro Siqueiros, and Juan O'Gorman, among most representative artists, produced with the frescoes a new public and educational art that lead us to reflect on our history and the social reality of our people even today. In the exhibition, we will be able to see, for instance, the iconic Central Library of Ciudad Universitaria, as well as the unknown photograph to almost everyone of its author, the architect Juan O'Gorman, with a scale model of what will become one of the most photographed monuments in Mexico. I am grateful for the presence of the Ambassador Reina Torres Mendívil, Consul General of Mexico in Chicago, a graduate from our university who together with the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, visited the murals on the central campus of UNAM a month ago, accompanied by a delegation of the University of Illinois system led by its president Timothy Killen and Chancellor Javier Reyes, who is here with us today. Thank you very, very much for coming, Javier. As well, with Jaime Di Paulo, president of the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and also a graduate for our university, as well as delegation of men and women from the city. During their visit, an office of the Illinois University system was opened in Ciudad Universitaria, and a memorandum of mutual understanding was signed with the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Without any doubt, all of these meaningful efforts will enrich the academic exchange and the student mobility between our universities and institutions, of course. I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to join the series of conferences that the Institute of Aesthetic Research is putting together in English under the title Public Art and Muralism in Mexico, which will be broadcasted from Mexico starting on November the 8th. Last but not least, I would like to acknowledge the UNAM Chicago team for the invaluable work to make this and many other projects possible. And of course, our thanks to our great friends Alejandro Romero for his support in curating this exhibit. I thank you again for your presence here today in this exhibition that reflects the cultural greatness of Mexico and UNAM, and of course UNAM in the history of our country. Thank you very, very much for being here.
El muralismo mexicano cumple en 2022 un siglo de vida. Este movimiento inició entre 1921 y 22 en el antiguo Colegio de San Ildefonso.
La universidad ha estado ligada a ese proceso desde el principio. Los murales en la preparatoria son un testimonio de ello.
Donde José Vasconcelos reunió un grupo de pintores, entre quienes estaba el Dr. Atl, Diego Rivera, José Clemente Orozco y David Alfaro Siqueiros, para cultivar artísticamente a los jóvenes de México. En esos años, Roberto Montenegro pintó el Árbol de la Vida en la Sala de Discusiones Libres de San Pedro y San Pablo, perteneciente a la Universidad Nacional. Pero para algunos, todo comenzó con una obra de Diego Rivera que proféticamente lleva por nombre La Creación, ya que este, a diferencia del primero, se ajusta totalmente a lo que hoy entendemos por muralismo.
Esta vanguardia que comienza a crear un nuevo modelo de imágenes, un nuevo tipo de propuesta visual.
¿Pero por qué se dice que San Ildefonso es la cuna del muralismo? Porque a la par de la creación, muchos de los artistas más importantes del siglo XX pintaban otros 40 murales, creando sin proponérselo una gran obra de conjunto que hoy desafía al tiempo.
Ese encuentro, ese diálogo entre todos estos artistas trabajando de una manera prácticamente simultánea, hizo que, digamos, lo que podemos llamar el laboratorio.
Hace 100 años, San Ildefonso albergaba la Escuela Nacional Preparatoria y los murales estaban pensados para conectar con los estudiantes. Un joven alumno llamado Octavio Paz lo describía así.
A esta hora, los muros rojos de San Ildefonso son negros y respiran. Sol hecho tiempo, tiempo hecho piedra, piedra hecha cuerpo.
El muralismo no tardaría en salir al mundo y sembrar sus obras en distintos países, pero el antiguo Colegio del Centro sigue siendo una cuna obligada para visitar.
De ver como en un solo conjunto, ¿no? En un solo inmueble, la diversidad de propuestas plásticas, estilísticas, temáticas, yo creo que eso es lo que lo hace mucho más rico y mucho más emblemático a quienes visitamos. Podemos visitar también San Ildefonso.
Y es que aquellos murales aún responden a esta idea de que el arte es revolucionario.
estamos nutridos de estas imágenes y tenemos que volver a reflexionar qué es lo que significan, ¿no? Hay problemas que siguen presentes en la sociedad mexicana y que pues no necesariamente se resolvieron.
Años después de iniciado este movimiento artístico, cuando la UNAM se mudó a su nueva sede al sur de la Ciudad de México, autoridades encargaron a José Chávez Morado un mural sobre la construcción de Ciudad Universitaria. Además de retratar a los académicos involucrados, el artista incluyó a los campesinos, a quienes el gobierno expropió tierras, que fueron invitados para trabajar en la construcción del magno proyecto. Creado hace 70 años con vinelita ácida, una técnica novedosa en aquel entonces, el mural La Ciencia y el Trabajo es una crónica detallada de cómo se construyó la Ciudad Universitaria de la UNAM.
Primer fragmento vemos a los campesinos de espaldas, como yéndose de sus tierras. Después vemos en un segundo momento a estos mismos campesinos siendo parte de la construcción, ¿no? de Ciudad Universitaria, siendo ya los albañiles.
A cambio de sus tierras, los ejidatarios fueron reubicados en Copilco, donde se les construyeron casas y escuelas, y se les ofreció empleo como peones de obra en la construcción de CU.
Chávez Morado se las ingenia para meter una crítica social ahí bastante fuerte. Solo tienes que ser muy observador para de verdad captarla.
En el mural, ubicado a un costado del Auditorio Alfonso Caso, aparecen los arquitectos. Después se muestra a los científicos en plena investigación, y en un lugar destacado se ve a Carlos Lazo, arquitecto que coordinó la construcción de CU, señalando hacia el progreso.
Y lo interesante es que atrás de todo esto siguen estando los campesinos, pero retratados como de una manera un tanto espectral, como que la gente que construyó Ciudad Universitaria no va a poder ser partícipe de esta, ¿no? Va a desaparecer atrás de todo este progreso científico, tecnocrático.
Así, Chávez Morado muestra la otra cara del mito del progreso. Una vez que la nueva utopía ha sido construida, los antiguos moradores son desterrados y se transforman en fantasmas para dar paso a los arquitectos y científicos. De esta forma, intenta devolverles a los campesinos esa importancia como elementos indispensables para el desarrollo. En otro frente, en el edificio de la Rectoría, David Alfaro Siqueiros empleó una novedosa técnica para realizar sus obras. De acuerdo con Irene Herner, investigadora de la Facultad de Ciencias Políticas y Sociales de la UNAM, Siqueiros hacía cine pintado, pues sus obras tenían movimiento y podían apreciarse desde diferentes perspectivas.
Siqueiros es el más novedoso, el más experimental de los muralistas.
En 3 de las 4 caras de la torre de rectoría de la UNAM en Ciudad Universitaria se ubican los murales más conocidos de David Alfaro Siqueiros, considerado el padre del muralismo callejero.
La obra de Siqueiros se caracteriza por la búsqueda y el hallazgo de nuevos materiales, de nuevas herramientas y de nuevas perspectivas en relación al muralismo.
Inspirados en la animación y el movimiento de las caricaturas de Disney, aprendidas por Siqueiros en Nueva York, los murales reúnen una técnica innovadora para su tiempo, la escultopintura, estructuras metálicas cubiertas de concreto y detalladas con mosaico de vidrio.
Y a través de la obra del muralismo en Ciudad Universitaria nace la segunda etapa del muralismo. Él decía que los murales callejeros tenían que ser muy sintéticos y que la escultopintura permitía que se viera toda la figura con mucho más claridad.
Bajo ese concepto, Siqueiros creó el mural El pueblo a la universidad al pueblo, en el lado sur de la torre, inspirado en el discurso de José Vasconcelos al tomar posesión como rector en 1921.
Él plantea que él venía a la universidad no para trabajar para la universidad, sino para inspirar a los universitarios a trabajar para el pueblo.
Por ello, en el mural se ve a un grupo de universitarios portar sus herramientas y salir del campus para entregar a la sociedad sus conocimientos. En el lado norte del edificio central se encuentra el derecho a la cultura, un brazo monumental que apunta hacia 5 fechas fundamentales en la historia de México, aunque la última quedó a propósito como una interrogante. En el muro poniente con vista al campus central está el nuevo símbolo universitario, mural que Siqueiros no concluyó y representa una abstracción del escudo universitario. Justo en ese espacio sesionaba hace algunos años el Consejo Universitario y actualmente hay un auditorio. Al frente de la rectoría en el Estadio Olímpico Universitario, Diego Rivera buscaba cubrir toda la fachada con una novedosa propuesta, pero los problemas de salud del artista mexicano le impidieron terminarlo. Pese a ello, las técnicas y el valor estético de su obra hicieron que este mural sea considerado Patrimonio Cultural de la Humanidad. Diego Rivera planeó que al llegar al Estadio Olímpico, un ave bicéfala creada por un cóndor y un águila que arropan con sus alas a una pareja desnuda, recibieran a los aficionados. El ave, símbolo del escudo universitario, está parada en un nopal, mientras que la pareja le da a su hijo una paloma, el símbolo de la paz universal. A los extremos, dos deportistas prenden la llama olímpica, y a los pies de todos ellos se ve al dios Quetzalcóatl, uno de los más importantes de las culturas mesoamericanas. Rivera consideraba el mural titulado La Universidad, la Familia y el Deporte en México el proyecto más importante de su vida.
Era conquistar el exterior, hacer murales que habitaran con la intemperie, que resistieran la lluvia, el viento, el sol, y como el arte antiguo de México, que siguiera de pie durante décadas.
Para integrar su obra con la arquitectura del estadio, Diego Rivera eligió la técnica de alto relieve, a la cual daba forma y volumen con concreto, y la recubría con piedras de colores naturales como tezontle, tecali, mármol y piedras de río,
en donde planteaba de este lado del estadio, digamos, una alegoría, una alusión al deporte en el siglo XX. Y del otro lado del estadio iba a ser una historia, una alegoría del mundo prehispánico.
Los bocetos del mural muestran que originalmente el proyecto rodearía todo el talud del estadio, pero solo se terminó la fachada principal.
Por un lado, Rivera, en sus bocetos, en sus dibujos, planificó esta intervención como una especie de cinematismo, es decir, como un fotograma de un atleta que va saltando.
La versión oficial señala que los trabajos no se terminaron por los problemas de salud de Rivera a causa del cáncer y por la falta de presupuesto, aunque pudo haber también otras razones.
Rivera empieza a polemizar con los arquitectos encargados de la obra de Ciudad Universitaria, porque tiene esta diferencia de ideas respecto de cómo se debe comportar la arquitectura cosmopolita.
Desde 2007, el mural del estadio es Patrimonio Cultural de la Humanidad.
Definitivamente no sería el Estadio Olímpico Universitario sin el gran mural de Diego Rivera.
Estas obras muralísticas son apenas una pequeña muestra de las múltiples propuestas e ideas que artistas de diferentes épocas han plasmado sobre la realidad mexicana. Si bien se ha logrado documentar buena parte de ellas, hay momentos en que es necesario buscar a otras disciplinas para contar todo aquello que no se ve a simple vista. La historia del arte tiene mucho que decir sobre el muralismo, pero también los científicos. Y es que más allá de lo que relatan sus trazos, los materiales usados en un mural con frecuencia cuentan historias no tan obvias, como qué artistas se compartían consejos, quiénes se ocultaban técnicas o quiénes tenían mayor financiamiento.
Nos permite saber qué tanto compartían las paletas, qué materiales usaban de lo que estaba disponible, eran pigmentos que venían de Europa o eran locales, de producciones nacionales, cómo los preparaban.
Con la unión de los Institutos de Física, Química e Investigaciones Estéticas de la UNAM, hace 8 años nació el Laboratorio Nacional de Ciencias para la Investigación y la Conservación del Patrimonio Cultural. En el centenario del muralismo, este laboratorio, mejor conocido como LANCIC, comenzó a analizar los murales en resguardo de la UNAM. El primero fue la creación de Diego Rivera, y el segundo, actualmente en estudio, es la alegoría de la Virgen de Guadalupe de Fermín Revueltas, aunque el objetivo es seguir trabajando con los demás en resguardo.
Rivera tenía acceso a una paleta pictórica más, digamos, de pigmentos de artista muy finos, y en este caso estamos encontrando otro tipo de pigmentos posiblemente, digamos, menos caros. También hay como menores recursos materiales, pero muchos recursos artísticos, ¿no?
Para que las obras no sufran daños, los universitarios han desarrollado una serie de técnicas que revelan datos de otra forma inaccesibles. La segunda fase consiste en un microanálisis a fin de determinar si los pigmentos son minerales u orgánicos y de mapear la obra. Sin embargo, esta etapa no aporta información sobre las propiedades químicas de los colores y aglutinantes, por lo que el último paso consiste en tomar una muestra minúscula y llevarla al laboratorio.
Y se toman muy poquitas muestras y muy pequeñas, a veces de la cabeza de un alfiler, normalmente eso de los bordes o de lugares que ya están deteriorados, escamados. Vamos pasando la muestra por diferentes técnicas y al final a veces hay unas que ya son destructivas y destruimos la muestra. Y lo que damos es eso, la composición de esa pequeña muestra. Podemos ver qué acrílico es, qué pigmentos tiene.
Los datos aportados por el LANCIC permitirán establecer las mejores estrategias de conservación para cada uno de ellos. Mientras tanto, la UNAM celebra el primer centenario del movimiento muralista mexicano. Grandes obras de grandes artistas que permanecen como un legado cultural e histórico que la Universidad de la Nación resguarda para el pueblo mexicano.
I would like to take the opportunity to invite everyone, after the event is done, to take a look at our poster with the QR codes where you can see at the end of this room, and you can download the issues of Gaceta UNAM where you can take them with you. And now I would like to ask Ambassador Reina Torres to come to the podium and just give us a few remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Buenas tardes a todas y todos. It's always a pleasure to be here. I always say the same thing, but I really feel it. This is my home too, so I feel at home every time that I'm here among my family, all the members of the UNAM Chicago team. Welcome everyone, my colleagues from the Consular Corps. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And of course, all of you visiting from Mexico, all the authorities from UNAM that are here. It's such a joy to have the opportunity to talk about things that are not usually talked about, because we're in the middle of our daily lives. So just to take a breath on a Thursday afternoon and come and see these beautiful images is by itself a joy. So thank you for this opportunity. 100 years of muralism. You may wonder. Of course, this is one of the iconic images that we have when we think about Mexico City. You go visit the Palacio de Bellas Artes, the Palace of Fine Arts, el Palacio Nacional, San Ildefonso, and of course UNAM. And you see those amazing, very powerful images that talk about our history. We could not understand Mexico's last century without acknowledging all that is reflected in these images. But also a movement that reached out, beyond borders. But to see how this was something that now is kind of embedded in the imagination of all Mexicans, just suffice it to go to Pilsen and see how there's a thread coming from those murals all the way to our communities and what our communities are expressing here. But of course, the talent and the art of Mexican muralists were all the way to New York, with a lot of controversy, but also to Detroit. So this is something that Mexico has contributed to the world. And that's something that we have to respect, to acknowledge, and to celebrate. And of course, I really appreciate that you're bringing this here. I knew that the UNAM was celebrated 100 years of muralism, but I wasn't sure if you were going to mark this occasion here. So as always, you're right on the spot. Thank you so much for doing that to all my friends of UNAM. Gracias, doctor, por haberlo traído aquí. And I just want to invite you to enjoy it and see what a little taste of what is so powerful, and put it in your list and your bucket list for when you go to visit Mexico. Not only Mexico City, there are many other places in Mexico where you can enjoy muralism. And always remember that it's not, of course, it's about the art, but it's also about our history, and it's about our struggles, and it's something that is very much alive. And it's alive in different forms and different shapes. And as I said, you can still find those roots, flourishing all the way here to among our communities in Chicago. So thank you very much and enjoy.
Thank you, Ambassador. And now I would like to ask our distinguished guest, Nestor Martinez, UNAM's press secretary, to come to the podium for brief remarks.
Dr. Guillermo Pulido, Director of UNAM in Chicago. Ambassador Reina Torres Mendívil, Consul General of Mexico in Chicago. I cordially greet the community of this UNAM Center. And Sandra Cetina, thank you for being here. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity to be here today with you at the inauguration of this important exhibition. Muralism holds great importance for Mexico, and it has also been extremely important for our university. This year, we celebrated the 100-year anniversary of muralism in Mexico. We celebrate this artistic movement in which many of the most renowned artists of the first half of the last century actively participated, a movement that gave Mexican art a central place in a society that was still in turmoil, and that claimed a place in world modern art that determined the course of the history of visual arts in our country. UNAM is the cradle of Mexican muralism, as our buildings, walls, and spaces around campus display the talent of artists such as Diego Rivera, David Alfaro Siqueiros, José Clemente Orozco, Roberto Montenegro, Francisco Eppens, Matías Geritz, José Chávez Morado, Carlos Mérida, Juan O'Gorman, Federico Silva, or María Izquierdo, to mention just a few of the outstanding muralists. Muralism was a movement of intellectuals that knew how to claim an autonomous space for the expression. It is for this reason that the UNAM has undertaken throughout this year an exercise of informing the community, particularly the youngest, about Mexican muralism and our vast and rich heritage. We have undertaken this task with a journalistic approach, which we have widely shared with Mexican society and now to those who live on this side of the border. We have aimed at the same time to promote a process of collective reflection on the origin and context behind the emergence of the muralist movement. The Office of Communication, through the pages of the Gaceta UNAM and UNAM Global platform with a lot of multimedia products, with invaluable advice and participation of experts from the Institute of Aesthetic Research, has been presenting every Monday the most representative murals, which are true jewels of the university patrimony. I'm certain that this exhibition will be able to stir reflection and faithfully reflect the importance of the muralist movement in its creators in Mexico, and at the same time show the relevant role that our institution, the University of the Mexican Nation, the University of all Mexicans, has played in this movement. Congratulations, and por mi raza hablará el espíritu. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Nestor. And now I would like to invite everyone to move to our second gallery for the interesting conference, the second part of our program, the conference by Sandra Cetina on the key moments in Mexican muralism. So thank you all for being here.
Sandra Cetina is a conservator and art historian. She has contributed to the field of heritage science and technical art history in Mexico. She's a researcher of material studies and modern art at the Instituto de Investigaciones Estéticas, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Founder and member of the National Laboratory of Sciences for the research and conservation of cultural heritage. Laboratorio Nacional de Ciencias para la Investigación y la Conservación del Patrimonio Cultural, supported by the National Council for Science and Technology, Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología. She received her PhD at the same university and teaches at the Art History graduate program. Her expertise is in the history of art technique and 20th century Mexican art. Her research is focused on creative processes in mural and easel painting, scientific studies of heritage, and the intersections of techniques, technology, and scientific concepts in Mexican art. She currently investigates Diego Rivera's first murals from 1922 to 1928 and his Parisian period from 1909 to 1920. Amongst her publications as co-author and co-curator are Ojos, Alas y Patas de Mosca, Visualidad, Tecnología y Materialidad de El Martirio de San Ponciano, de Baltasar de Echaveorio, UNAM 2018. Low Viscosity, The Birth of Fascism and Other Solutions, UNAM 2013. Shattered Glass, Rethinking the Museo de Arte Carrillo Gil Collection, IMBA, American Society, 2012. And La Materia del Arte, José María Velasco y Hermenegildo Bustos, Museo Nacional de Arte, 2004. So thank you very much, Professor Cetina, for being here, for having traveled all the way from Mexico, even though you weren't feeling all that good. Also, it's great to have you here. Thank you, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you so much, Erika. Good afternoon to all of you. Buenas tardes. I thank also UNAM Chicago for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's an honor to present the exhibition Muralism in Mexico Reinterpreted, created by my colleagues Ricardo Alvarado and Cecilia Gutierrez from the Manuel Toussaint Photographic Archive at UNAM, Instituto de Investigaciones Estéticas. We are celebrating the centennial of Mexican muralism, and what better way to do it than through the dissemination and reinterpretation of images from the murals themselves. The Manuel Toussaint Photographic Archive possesses one of the better collections of images of Mexican murals. Images from the moment they were constructed, as this one that portrays Rivera in front of the history of Mexican theater, a private commission work for Teatro de los Insurgentes, and that in a closer look shows Rivera's assistants transferring the composition to the facade. Also, the archive is rich in preparatory drawings and sketches of murals that allow art historians the understanding of creative processes and vintage color prints from different periods that are useful to understand the history and conservation of murals. More importantly, you will see here, at the exhibition, Ricardo Alvarado technique, that are panoramic views formed by mosaics of photographs that are captured with a robotic device that may transfer all the details of monumental compositions. This innovative documentation process developed at UNAM are instrumental for the study and conservation of Mexican murals. I'll show you some of the details of these panoramic views to illustrate the complexity of the narrative of muralism. Each section of Historia del Teatro is crowded with historical figures, narratives, and allegories of Mexican history, from the pre-Hispanic past to the independence and revolution, popular and folk art. It is difficult to grasp the meaning of Rivera composition in a glance. Thus, it would be impossible to address the complexity and long history of muralism in just one talk, or even just the murals presented in the exhibition. There are hundreds of murals that were commissioned by the state during almost all the 20th century, and murals are dense in meaning, historical and aesthetic problems. Because of that, I have chosen two of the murals and events that may help to delineate the nature of muralism and the way it was originated, transformed and reinterpreted throughout the 20th century. I will relate its narrative to some of the images presented in this exhibition. And I will also, and this process will also allow me to stress the role of the university that I think has been already underlined several times today, but in the development of Mexican muralism. I will start with creation. Diego Rivera's first mural, painted with the aristocratic Greek painting technique called encaustic, a mixture of beeswax and copper resin fused by torch at the amphitheater in the National Preparatory School. Creation is a tense and complex composition, difficult to understand at first sight, crowded with allegories, symbols, and references to modern, popular, Renaissance, and Byzantine art. Creation is a living piece of the Mexican avant-garde due to its formal, technical, and symbolic innovations. It could be considered the paradigmatic image of the beginning of the mural movement, before the nationalistic imaginary was configured. But it's also a thesis and avant-garde experiment in which Diego Rivera essays several traits that would accompany him throughout his career. A structure of pictorial space that contends with the architectonic space, allegorical portraits, and the intention to create public art in a collective way. The first image is a panoramic view photographed by Ricardo Alvarado in 2017. Based on a technical and art historical study, which you have seen a little bit, I transformed the colors and I inserted the organ at the center, which completed the composition as the body of the central male figure. The topic alludes to the creation of the world in the biblical sense, but also to intellectual or artistic invention and the transmission of knowledge in a multi-level composition, perfect for a lecture and a music hall. Rivera arranged the figures in 4 different levels: the woman and the man, or Eve and Adam on the ground, and on the next level, allegories of the arts and sciences, which, after description published by Rivera, can be easily related to the 9 muses. The muses are distributed over the month Parnassus. On the left side, described by Rivera as the feminine side, muses represent embodied arts like the chant, the dance, the music, and are accompanied by comedy. And in an upper level, the theological virtues, charity, hope, and faith. On the right side, the masculine side, muses are related to intellectual activities, knowledge, fable, tradition, erotic poetry, and tragedy. The theological virtues acquired by mind and character, chastity, fortitude, justice, and prudence. At the center, 2 angelical figures, wisdom and science, dressed as Hinduist deities in meditative body and hand or mudra positions, surround a cosmic circle, the light of the sun shining through constellations, encircled by the rainbow. In the composition, light was used as a metaphor of the way knowledge spreads from the divine to the human level. Before painting this mural, Rivera lived in Paris more than 10 years, working closely to the Cubist avant-garde, and before returning, traveled through Italy to study antique murals. Impressed by the luxurious surfaces of Byzantine Ravenna mosaic, he replicated some of the features, like the imago clipata, which is this encircled cross by the rainbow, or the central cosmic circle surrounded by a rainbow and angels to portray the presence of God, as may be appreciated at the San Vitale Apse in Ravenna, Italy. In a photograph taken during the painting process of creation, it's easy to recognize the relationship of the mural with the light that came through the glass ceiling in the vault of the amphitheater. And this relationship emphasizes the essence of the composition, which depicts the dawn, the moment of the daybreak, the beginning of a new day in which the light, a metaphor of knowledge, disseminates from the skies to the earth. Rivera took this model from Renaissance schemes of cosmic scales of knowledge, used by painters like Raphael or Perugino to decorate places of study like libraries or La Stanza della Signatura at the Vatican, which was the library of Pope Julius II. Moreover, through the study of a series of photographs and sketches, we know that Rivera not only related the composition to the glass ceiling, but also removed the original organ that covered the acoustic shell. Here you can see, no, at the first image, how was the amphitheater before Rivera and after Rivera. Today the glass ceiling is blocked, but it's easy to see the way the painting affected the space when we compare it with an image before Rivera's intervention. The painting echoes the arcs and walls of the building. So this operation of contending the space between painting and architecture became one of the central ideas of Mexican muralism. For instance, the concept of the plastic box. Sorry. But here in another image by Ricardo Alvarado, it's more easy to see. For instance, the concept of the plastic box developed by David Alfaro Siqueiros, a completely immersive space, a room painted by all sides in a way that defies architecture, like this polyangular hall at the Tallera in Cuernavaca, Morelos, or the inside of Polyforum in the 1970s. But let's go back to Rivera's first mural. Creation searched for synthesis of styles from Byzantium to modern and folk art, but also aligning to the interests of his patron, José Vasconcelos, dean of the university at the time. He intended to portray the conflicting concept of mestizaje. José Vasconcelos designed the innovative cultural and educational program for Mexican illiterate post-Civil War society, inspired by 16th century evangelization processes, in which murals had also a central role, images used in a didactic way. Deeply anti-colonial and anti-imperialism, at the core of Vasconcelos' philosophical interest was to propose a new aesthetic tradition, a mixture of classical, oriental, and local civilizations that would renovate and lead humanity after the decline of the West, in terms of Oswald Spengler. He believed that literacy and artistic creation had an emancipatory role in society, and that Mexico would take the opportunity of revolution to lead a new continental aesthetic tradition. Vasconcelos' theorization of mestizaje included the idea of creating this new tradition, this new Mexican culture, based on blending of these universal forms and meanings, but also the idea of the blending of the races. In response to mestizaje, Rivera stated that he created a rainbow of skin tones from the darker to the whiter shades, and looked closely, the mural problematized stereotypes of gender, class, and race, and had been upended by the revolution. He portrayed Mexican women according to their profession, social origin, social position, political position, and physical traits, with a specific virtue or art represented by each allegorical figure. Many of the women who modeled for these figures were known as feminists, emancipated women, as Lupe Marin, that I presented the images, or professionals who contributed to post-revolutionary culture as artists, dancers, composers, models like Luz Jimenez here, writers, comedians, poets, philosophers, and lawyers. Well, here is Lupe Rivas-Cacho. Or as women who, through their ideals, physical characteristics, and lifestyles, would act as exemplars for the new Mexican woman, and in conjunction as the body of the nation. Well, here we have Dolores Asunzolo, Dolores del Rio, no? As the music, Gabriela Mistral, that posed for science, and Naui Olin who posed for erotic poetry. At the center of the composition, equally inspired by Byzantine mosaics, Rivera placed a nude man with open arms, which he referred to as the Pantocrator, the all-powerful Christ, accompanied by a tetramorph showing the four figures emblematic of the evangelists: the cherub for Matthew, eagle for John, lion for Mark, and the ox for Luke. On the side walls of this section, which are not visible from the auditorium seats, in another tetramorph featuring animals typical of Mexican tropical rainforest: a pig egret, a harpy eagle, a puma, and a jaguar. This man could also be interpreted as the mestizo, the merging of all races rising at the tropical forest. Creation was considered a milestone by the group of young American artists associated with the Declaration of National Preparatory. It was inaugurated as the first mural of the Sindicato de Obreros, Técnicos, Pintores y Escultores, Technical Workers, Painters, and Sculptors Union, as a collective enterprise, since it bears no signature by Rivera. It's the only mural that is not signed by Rivera. However, other murals problematize in more innovative and deep ways the topic of mestizaje. For instance, the French painter Jean Charlotte, following Rivera's geometrical integration to architecture, used fresco for the first time, and also initiated the series of paintings that would deal with historical events to depict mestizaje as a conflicting event. Unarmed mexicas, possibly also using the image to portray the cruelty of technological war, since he just participated as a soldier in First World War. At the same stairway, in National Preparatory and in fresco, José Clemente Orozco would doubt of the empowering qualities of mestizaje in an image of violent beauty, an image that would also reflect about the tones of skin, but in a deeply critical way. Cortés grabs one hand and imposes the other over Malinche to contain her or to prevent her to live, while he also steps into a fallen man. The Panorama by Ricardo Alvarado and his team permit us to see as well the integration with architecture of this series of frescoes, in which evangelization and mestizaje are met with all the violence of history. These were the first images that dare to imagine the conquest as the original myth of Mexican culture, images in which political beliefs, ideas about technology, culture, and civilization were dealt with. The Battle of the Conquest as a foundational myth was revisited by many of the muralists in their public commissions in sites of maximum visibility, places of consecration, like the National Palace for Diego Rivera. There, history became the battlefield in itself, a place to reorder and prioritize events, personage, present novel interpretation, or to expose an opinion. Possibly one of the densest murals ever painted, and there are many, Rivera's History of Mexico presents events unfolding as in a collage or in a cinematographic movie, in which time and space bend throughout the three walls that cover the magnificent Empress staircase in the emblematical site of political power in Mexico. At the core of the composition, Rivera placed the conquest occurring around the Teocalli of Sacred War, and as Jean Charlotte recalled, Paolo Uccello Battle of San Romano, to present the conquest as a Mesoamerican war in which Tlaxcaltecas had a central role. At his cycles, as well, Siqueiros, at his cycles at the Fine Arts Palace, created monumental sculpture-like figures to reflect on the sacrifice of leaders of the resistance. Cuauhtémoc is presented as the figure of the nation rebelling to imperial forces, in a metaphor of the tense political relationships between Mexico and the United States during the 1940s. Juana Borman, in the castle of Chapultepec, portrayed Mexican independence as a carnival in which the people of Mexico suffered a martyrdom he depicted half-nude figures in positions of the Calvary of Christ. Images taken during the painting process show the back of O'Gorman working on site, and the synopia diluted by the constant application of water and colors during the fresco painting process. In another, very poetic image, the dilution of the pigments creates a weeping wall over O'Gorman's design and shows some of the pigments, tools, and the jacket of the painter. Also at the Castle of Chapultepec, when it was transformed into National Museum of History in the 1960s, murals were commissioned to illustrate history, the common practice of muralism by the time. Siqueiros created a movie cinematographic choreography to express the empowering changes in society from Porfiriato to Revolution. An image so successful, this one, that was used for the Mexican banknotes several decades. I would like to close my argument referring to the second phase of muralism, which, like taking a leap in time, which also occurred at the National University, UNAM, when the central campus was built between 1952 and 1956. Here again, artists worked through the tensions between architecture and painting, and possibly the most celebrated example is the Central Library at Ciudad Universitaria, designed and built by Juan O'Gorman, architect and painter. The historical representation of culture is an intricate iconographic program that unfolds in each of the four exterior monumental walls. Here we see the photographs you are seeing outside, where the other architects are showing the scale of the project. Articulated as a coating or a tapestry formed by millions of colored stones, minerals from Mexico soil, and blue glass, configures a modernist texture that relates to Mexican basin landscape through the resonance of colors and textures. O'Gorman used the flat mode of Mexican codexes and scenes from several pre-Hispanic and colonial painted manuscripts, the Borbónicos, the Mendoza, and the Lienzo Tlaxcala. The north wall is dedicated to pre-Hispanic period and presents an Amos Cali, the pre-Hispanic library for codices. The south wall alludes to the colonial period and once again to the conquest, in which the implantation of the cross and Catholicism are presented in a cosmic scheme of good and evil. National history is presented as the cosmos in two contrasting visions of Ptolomeo and Copernico. The two circles present different visions of the cosmos. The east wall is dedicated to contemporaneous world, in which it is possible to see the presence of the atom as a technological cosmic presence of the West, and in the west wall there is the official seal of the university designed by Vasconcelos that floats at the center of the composition to dedicate it to the university and modern Mexico. As all of the buildings at the main campus, O'Gorman followed international trends of rationalism, Bauhaus, and functionalism, Le Corbusier. The building is a solid block without windows, originally designed to house the collection of the National Library. The challenge that faced O'Gorman was to reconcile the apparent paradox of adopting the international solution with a nationalistic. Again, as Rivera and Vasconcelos, O'Gorman was faced to create something truly national, but therefore universal. As a conclusion, it is possible to say that muralism was essentially this space of public debate, this object of imagination that transformed the public art, but it's also an uneasy movement, sometimes portraying the violence and the problematic elements at the core of Mexican history and identity, problems unresolved, and because of that, this exhibition presents the idea that Mexico may be reinterpreted. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. This was so inspiring and interesting to understand a little bit more of what
what's at the
I try
top.
to.
Yeah, it's a challenge to say all this in just half an hour, but thank you very much. You did a great job. And before I ask you if anyone has some questions for our speaker, let me just remind you what our director said at the end of the inauguration, that we have this series of talks coming up that put together by the Institute of Aesthetic Research. So we will have the first talk on November 8th by Sandra Cedina again. It'll be in English. And also on November 10th, 15th, and 17th with other three very renowned specialists in muralism. So I'm sure you will be able to enjoy this. It's a free program. It's open access. It will be through Zoom. So you can be in your home or wherever you're at enjoying these talks. So I'll just leave this here. I didn't have a chance to give one for everyone, but I'll leave it here in case you want to take one with you when you leave. And if there's anyone who would like to address a question or a comment to our speaker.
Thank you. Did Rivera and the early muralists have an image in their mind of what they wanted to paint, or did they begin in one place and add along to it as they went along? Sorry.
No, thank you for the question. No, we have a lot of. There was a discussion actually about creation, for example. We know that he delivered a description, a complete description to Jose Vasconcelos. There has been said, like, Vasconcelos has no saying in what they portray, but it's not true when we read the documents carefully. And also we have a large collection. I didn't present them because I'm saving them for one day. But we have a huge collection of sketches by Diego Rivera. So yes, there's a lot of, like, he really worked through all the composition in like, some are like just ideas, and other ones, it's like he's working through the composition. And the only thing that he decided at the end how to paint was the center. And this is interesting because it's where I said the mestizo figure, no? Probably a self-portrait, no? This mestizo figure, and that's where he changes the way he's painting. He forgets about Italy, and he starts to think about how to paint as to synthesize more the Mexican forms that he saw in the isthmus of Tehuantepec.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Professor Cedina. I have a question for you. In terms of the iconic photograph that was taken in 1938, that photograph of by Fritz Bach of Breton, Trotsky, and Diego Rivera. Would you be able to comment on that vis-a-vis the history of muralism in Mexico and the great debate of committed art versus art for art's sake? Thank you.
That's a thesis question, thank you. Yes, the thing is that we are in Mexico, we are used to art that's political, no? And this is, well, I work sometimes with other countries, no, like in the United States or France, and they usually ask us, no, well, the nature of this. Why were you so used to these almost propaganda-like looking images, no? And I think that exactly that moment, no, when André Breton, that is leader of the surrealist movement, that has nothing to do with this way of making art. No, it's exactly the opposite way of making art. Unites with Trotsky, and this is a moment. It's a very particular moment in history, and I think that all of them were really concerned about what was happening in the world. No, so it's like a united front, but not necessarily they were in the same page. No? About the nature of what they meant, because also surrealism made some political art, but in a surrealist way. No, so I think the good art, the good aesthetic, has to do something about the life and obviously about politics. No? So there is no art for art's sake. No, that does not exist. No, we are political in everything we do. No, even if we don't want to be political. No, that's a political way of being. No, of doing. So I hope I respond.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you so much, Sandra, for your very interesting lecture. I was just thinking when you were talking about surrealism and the muralism and the movement of the anarchists in those days, we have to frame what, as you said, what were happening around the world, what will happen here also in the States. I'd like to ask you, what do you think of the influences of the muralism in Mexico, for example, in China, in China or in other countries? I mean, and of course in the United States with the Mexican American and the Chicano movements and many other American people started to do these great obras. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the question. Actually, yes, Diego Rivera especially, sorry, I talk about Diego because this is what I studied. No? Diego Rivera was understood when he worked in Paris and through his contact with the avant-garde, especially with Picasso and Cubism, understood like the capacity of art to be an action of provocation, to provoke, and I think when he and Siqueiros met in Europe and present the first manifest, and they come back to Mexico, they really with the same idea of Vasconcelos, they really want to transform the art not only in Mexico but in the world. They were trying to really present a new proposal of art that would lead the world, and in a moment they really did it. No, actually they came here to the United States, and the United States followed the muralist movement during several years. No, and also this is like waves, that come and go, and actually yes, like several other artists in their way have been inspired by this idea of public art. Let's say it more generally, It's not necessarily that they have to follow muralism as it is now, But nowadays they take all these mixture of of activism, let's say, that's one component of muralism, like political activism and public art to present, monumental pieces. That could be, and obviously yes, muralism has been exhibited in China, but I don't know, Sadly, I've never been there, but I'm sure that there must be, also. I know that there was, yes, like a traveling exhibition. Even some pieces of Frida Kahlo were lost in that travel to Asia. That there was. And Siqueiros, yes. There were some pieces that were lost, but I know that it has reached Asia, Mexican muralism.
Okay, first of all, thank you for the excellent presentation. What I wanted to state is, well, one of the murals that I feel more connected to is the one from the Teatro de Insurgentes. And I sadly, for most of my life, saw it slowly deteriorate and fall down. And that's where my question lies. When it comes to the restoration of such mural, is that done by UNAM, or is that done by another person? And are these talks, are they going to expand to the breakaway generation, or are they going to stay more on the muralist side? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yes, well, integración plástica, this last clear murals, integración plástica was a difficult problem, because there is no immortal materials, they do not exist, mosaic was even deemed by Giorgio Vasari, the great art historian, as the immortal material, but they said that mosaic was the true painting, that fresco painting was just like the sketch, mosaic was forever. But the truth is that everything deteriorates, and mostly in a city like Mexico City, with all the pollution and acidic rain and all that. And the thing is that no, the university, we do not have in charge the conservation of the murals. This is a task for the National Fine Arts Institute, SECRAPAM, the National Center of Conservation. It's by law, because these murals are declared as national artistic heritage. But the university participates in, for example, in all the murals that are property of the university, which are some of the most important, like creation or the university campus. The university works close together, with SECRAPAM. But yes, the conservation is a truly difficult problem, and what we participate is in doing the research, like the scientific research and documentation, and that's why we are designing all these tools, technological tools to understand the materials and techniques and to prevent the damage, which is better than to restore them. And the other question?
The breakaway generation.
Until the last conference is going to be by Dr. Rita Eder, and she actually is going to talk about, yes, like this, the part, what we were saying, not muralism like this static object, of fresco. It's like more public art, and how like the neo-avant-garde or the ruptura took the lead after the 1950s of public art, and how they reinterpreted the idea of monumental pieces.
Thank you.
Sí,
So my doubt has to do with this one. Yeah. The ones made of mosaic. I doubt is, I imagine that there's a drawing behind that the artist makes. And then the ones that come and put the mosaic as, it's not the artist, it's workers. Yes, art. So what happens with the very small details? Because how small are the mosaics? Because if we have very small details, like the ones that are curved, that means that mosaic is also painted? Or it's just very, very small?
No, they're very small.
Oh,
They,
Sí.
We're going to listen to the other two questions and then she can answer the three of them.
Muchas gracias por tu presencia y todo lo que estás compartiendo. And you're privilege and a pleasure to have you since you're an expert. You can answer some bizarre, curious, passionate questions that we have. My question is directed more to film. You mentioned Dolores del Rio, Ramon Navarro. They were huge Hollywood stars, but they're Mexican. You know, they're from my home state of Durango. And I'm curious to see how the 20s, 30s, and 40s, you know, the renaissance or the birth of golden age of Mexican cinema, how muralism then played a part of also rebuilding that image of the, you know, el nuevo mexicano, because the U.S. was very keen on what sells as big Hollywood production and whatnot. So I'm curious, where did muralism then connect, if at all, to Mexican film, and then how Hollywood did or didn't pay attention to what was happening in that big, huge film industry? Muchas gracias.
And then the other question again.
Good afternoon, everybody. Looking at these murals 100 years later, we kind of lost the perspective of the deep knowledge, the cultural acumen, and the political status of each of these artists, right? So what I wonder is if you can comment on the level of documentation and preparation each of these artists would have before creating these pieces, right? From the sketching part up to the process of commenting the narrative to the sponsoring parties, right? In a context where Mexico was 70% illiterate, and the film industry, for example, depicted some of those aspects within the films and was a carry forward for a few decades after that.
Thank you. What an interesting topic we have today. So first, sorry. I found an image, but now I get lost. I found an image, but yes, about the details. No, they made like they really made sketches at size. So, and they can cut the mosaics, no? This is called technique, no? It's a technique that it's, they cut, no importa. They cut each mosaic, no? In the size. They cut it. They cut it. You can put and cut it. Yes, it's a very old technique that comes from the Greeks, no? Like the all the floors in no in the Greeks and Roman mosaics, no. And no, and for the films. It's interesting. We did a conference on the conquest, the idea of the conquest, and I invited a colleague that he works on cinema, and it was interesting to see the contrast between the topics that muralism was dealing with and the topics that golden cinema, they never, it's like there are two films about the conquest, and they're very low budget and rare and no? So it's interesting because they were like working with different ideas, no? It's like they were, I think that somehow like muralism became an elite, no? It's more like an elite ideas, and no, even though that it's supposedly for the public, but probably cinema work more with the tensions and passions of the everyday, no? More than the muralism wasn't about the everyday, no? It wasn't so. It was like the big topics, no? Probably I would say so. And about documentation, it's crazy. For example, Rivera was really an erudite, no? When I studied creation, I never imagined that I had everything that I had to read and look at, no? I had to travel to Italy to see all the murals and really finding it's really a mixture of so many, no? We found details like some of the, no? That are present in San Vitale, Ravenna, no? Of the pans that stand the cupola. You don't even recognize them, no? And then you can see it. And then also for other historical murals, no? For the National Palace, there's a person that has been working through all the documentation. The Teocalli de la Guerra Sagrada was aquí está lo de los mosaicos. The Teocalli de la Guerra Sagrada was unearthed then, and a lot of pre-Hispanic pieces, ancient codexes, photographic documentation of the revolution. They really like made a lot of research, no, for each piece, and also yes, portrayed people. So it's really, yes, it was a task, an intellectual task, no, not only an artistic task, but also an intellectual task.
Yes. Quiero hacer la última pregunta de last question is about why in the past we follow the University of Mexico history, the muralists, and but after the 1970s they don't continue to in the new buildings put new generation the murals or continue documenting our time today. Like is the Spanish the movement about the muralists. I'm talking about it because I am artist muralist. I come from La Esmeralda. The professor I have is the Fridos, like Arturo Castro, for example. Another one's more, Jose Bajonero, etc. But I try to see in the new building in UNAM, it doesn't think in the architect to make the murals more talking about our history and our society in any kind of event we have. Probably because they don't want controversy or anything about this, and they start to make more abstract or more decorative things. It's like we don't document our time today.
Well, actually, I understand what you know, the way you see it. But each, yes, if inside the university, it has never been like how do you say, like someone that said, let's put these murals. It was each community that decided which mural and which artist they chose. So it isn't like the university is a good way it works. No, it works like that. It's more horizontal, and no, it comes from the community. It's so interesting to see like the lists of the people that participated. For example, in the science buildings that today are the Chavez Morado, no, the Alfonso Caso Auditorium, and it was when you see the architects, but also Nabor Carrillo, like the scientists, are quoted as participants of the project. No, Chavez Morado as well as Nabor Carrillo, so it was like something that was decided inside the community. So there is no like yes, like a how do you say, like a, yes, like a una directriz, no, like a, no, like a norm, no, of how to portray murals. But what I can tell you is that what we found with this Gaceta, this exercise of doing the Gaceta each week, along with Nestor and their team, no, it's like there is a lot of contemporary murals in the university. Actually, we found a huge amount of contemporary murals at the university, probably not in mosaic and made for lasting forever, and probably not dealing with, no, it's like, but there's like a Toledo, Francisco Toledo, beautiful mural, and also at the, well, there are like a lot, no, of contemporary, interesting, super interesting objects of public art. So we will the site, no, it's still I don't know, Muralismo 100, no, you can look for it, and we presented some of these more recent pieces and very interesting, a different kind of murals. Some of them quite political. Eh?
I think mural in the school or CCH in Naucalpan, in the library. For example, my generation 1976, exactly. And I saw they continue to make more and more murals outside, like some kind of inspired in probably in some kind of movement about the mural time or muralist Mexican, but later they start to the Spanish more. They don't touch too much about our time in our society. For example, the wars or problem about the economies or any kind of thing. The artists, they start more focused, or probably when the artist will make a proposal, they select more, they choose more the artists who don't make controversy in our time. I think